I'm Peter Gelblum. I'm the chair of the Santa Cruz chapter of the ACLU of Northern California. Thank you. I just want to remind you, if you haven't signed in yet, please sign in at the front table here. Keith Lazar is there with his nice straw hat on. Keith, you want to raise your hand? There you go. The food's been out there for a while. There's still plenty of food there, and Joe assures us it will not run out, so you can get some more later. I wanted to introduce first the board members. All but one of us are here today. Either raise your hand or stand, please, so people can know who you are when I say your name. Abbi Samuels. There she is. Brenda Griffin is not with us today. Denise Elerick, who's our newest board member, up in front over here. Dorah Rosen, where's Dorah? Up in front at the food line. Keith Lazar, who's been checking people in. Lee Brokaw, right there, Lee, who brought some of the wonderful wine, if you've been drinking the wine. Ron Pomerantz. Ron, where are you? Where are you? Somewhere over there. All right, I see Jane. All right, he's around somewhere. Stacey Falls, who is being our bartender today, extraordinaire, and Steve Pleich. There's Steve. So these, I wanted to introduce them just so, a couple reasons. One, so I'm about to go through some of the work that the board has done since we saw you last, which was too long ago, January 2020. It's a good thing we did manage to get that in before we got locked down, so that's tremendous. But it's been a long time, and we've done, even though we've been limited in what we can do, we've done a bunch of stuff, which you'll hear about in a minute. But also so that at any time during the program today, you have an idea about something, a civil liberties issue that you think is going on here in the county that we have not done anything about and you'd like us to do something about, please do it. You can approach any one of those board members and let us know, or just send an email to, I believe it's santacruzaclu@gmail.com. Yeah. So please let us know, because that's what we're here. Hey, I touched the mic again. That's what we're here for. We're here to take care of the issues that you guys bring to our attention and that bubble up. So please do let us know. So what have we done? Perhaps our biggest victory since January 2020 is that we are instrumental in getting the Santa Cruz City Council in June of 2020 to ban the use of facial recognition technology and predictive policing. Santa Cruz is the first city in the country to ban predictive policing, and one of the first in the country to ban the use of facial recognition technology. That work was ongoing and extensive, included a forum that we put on pre-COVID. It was in person at the RCNV that included then Mayor Justin Cummings, who was on the panel and later credited that panel and being on that panel as a major inspiration for him and information for him that he could use to push those bans in the city. So that was great. We also met repeatedly with Chief Mills, several elected officials, and the city attorney and other city officials to urge them to enact the bans. Now, of course, that work's not done. The work's never done, as all you activists know. Those two bans were part of a broader, much broader surveillance technology ordinance that we were pushing for, but has not yet been enacted here, and we are still pushing for it. And when the time comes, we'll let you know, because we may need your help with that. We will need your help. Thank you, Lee. In December 2020, that's almost a year ago now, we produced and hosted a public online forum about alternative non-law enforcement responses to 911 calls. In an attempt to turn the ideas discussed at the forum into reality, several of us have been working with others to get the county and its various cities to expand the present severely limited mobile crisis response network so it can be 24/7, 365, and go anywhere and everywhere someone is in crisis. They don't do that now. We define crises as including mental health crises, substance abuse, welfare checks, homelessness, whoever needs immediate help, and we want people to be able to get that help without law enforcement involvement, because as we've seen repeatedly, law enforcement can sometimes not only not help, but can hurt the situation, aggravate the situation. We're honored to have as one of the members of that group, Jeffrey Arlt, who is the father of Sean Arlt, who, as you all know, was killed by the Santa Cruz Police Department several years ago. So Jeffrey's been an enormous help with that. In connection with that, we've met and had discussions with members of the Board of Supervisors, the Santa Cruz City Council, UCSC behavioral health leaders, the county's behavioral health leaders, other mental health and related professionals, and the chief of police. But so far, we have nothing to show for it, but we're continuing to work on it and push it very hard. You may read in the media that lots and lots of other jurisdictions are doing this, and it's not a problem. By the way, I meant to say that if you want to move around to make it easier to look this direction, feel free to do that anytime, okay? In June 2021, we did another public online forum. We co-produced a forum about establishing a sheriff's oversight group pursuant to a state law that was enacted in the fall of 2020, known as AB 1185. Several board members continue to work with others to bring such an oversight organization to Santa Cruz County, with a particular focus on the severe and persistent and recurring problems with the Santa Cruz County Jail. Two of our honorees tonight, you'll hear more from them about that, because they're really focused on that. Those problems include inadequate physical and particularly mental health care, deaths, sexual assaults by deputies. It's really sort of extraordinary that this has been allowed to continue. The grand jury's been reporting it for many, many years, and nothing has happened. So we're working on that. We plan to put another forum on this fall on immigration issues, particularly immigration detention after people are released from local custody. We continue our years-long practice of reviewing all Board of Supervisors and City Council agendas to watch for civil liberties issues so that we can make our voices heard when appropriate. And I urge anyone and everyone here, if they're aware of something that's coming up at a Board of Supervisors or City Council meeting, to let us know, to make sure that, because we miss it sometimes. As you know, if you ever look, those agendas can be very dense and hard to fathom. So if you know of something coming up, please let us know. Several of the board members have continued to work closely with our houseless community, including being part of a coordinated and successful effort to prevent sweeps from occurring at San Lorenzo Park during the pandemic. We wrote to the City Council with objections to and comments on both the new the camping ordinance and the proposed ordinance essentially banning RV parking throughout the city. So we're continuing to work on both of those issues. We've also managed to engage our parent organization, the ACLU of Northern California, with its expertise, attorneys, and much greater resources in this work, and they've written to the council about these issues as well. And that's no small feat, because they get demands from all over Northern California, or requests from all over Northern California to help out. So we've really managed to tie them in and get their power behind us. We've also lobbied the police chief to stop towing vehicles that people live in, both because of COVID dangers and because towing those vehicles results in what? More people living on the streets. It's just stupid. These efforts actually were successful for a few months at the height of the original height of the pandemic. I don't know, we're in our third or fourth surge now, but the original height, they did stop towing for a few months because of our advocacy. But as you probably all know, they've started up again. Two of our board members actually serve on the Chief's Advisory Committee, so he gets our input directly from them. In what has led to our featured speaker today, one of our board members, Dorah Rosen, has been a liaison between the ACLU and the Amma Mutsun and Friends of Uristac, the local ally group for the Amma Mutsun. This work has included commenting at public meetings, tabling and canvassing neighborhoods, doing research, writing letters and comments, trying to protect parts of the sacred lands of Uristac from being built on or permitted as a gravel mine and quarry. We also helped out at the recent bell removal ceremony regarding the last remaining mission bell on public land in Santa Cruz. And the seminar on the indigenous perspective of the mission system before this summer. How many of you grew up in California, went to elementary school in California? Did you all do like panoramas of the missions? right? I didn't grow up here, but my wife did, and she did that, and it's, of course, we're not told the real story, and I don't even know if they're told the real story today. I don't think so. It's so bizarre because the real story is so clear and so at odds with what kids are taught, but they're still having to do these cute little panoramas with the cute little Indians running around, right? Instead of being thrown off the walls. Another one of our board members is working with the ACLU of Northern California to make sure that the impending district elections for the Santa Cruz City Council really do increase representation. I encourage you all to get involved in that effort if you're not already. It could have a real impact on the politics here in Santa Cruz, in the city of Santa Cruz. We lobbied both the Santa Cruz City Council and the Board of Supervisors to make their agendas, their minutes, and all of their meeting documents available in Spanish, which they don't do yet. It's sort of, somebody brought it to our attention a year or more ago, and we checked and we were like stunned to find that out, especially the Board of Supervisors, because the county has, I think, approximately 35% Spanish speakers. So we're continuing to work on that. They gave the excuse before, well, we don't have any money because of COVID, and we don't have time to do anything except COVID, and get rid of homeless people. But that's an effort that we want to continue. We met with city officials to give them our input on the qualifications they should look for in a new city manager after Martin Bernal announced his resignation. We worked to get, I guess that process is still ongoing. They haven't found somebody new yet, or they found somebody. My understanding is they found somebody, but the person backed out at the last minute. So they're still looking for somebody. We worked to get.
To live here.
Say it again.
He couldn't afford to live.
Now I think what I heard anyway was that they turned out the person had not really been serious. They were just using this application to give them some leverage in another where they really wanted to go.
Higher salary than where they were.
Yeah, probably. We worked to get local schools to stop using law enforcement officers on campus to disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. Yeah. That, of course, received a setback recently with the tragic stabbing at Aptos High, which was sort of predictable that would result in resource officers coming back to campus. Hopefully, I think they did it on a temporary basis, so hopefully they will not continue. My understanding is...
They can't interpret things in Spanish, but they have money for that.
Right. Well, the schools pay for that, I think, not the county. But my understanding is that there's no data at all anywhere in the world that the presence of these resource officers reduces violence or helps in any way, shape, or form. Anyway, that happened. We advocated for the passage of AB 1344, which would support harm reduction programs, including those in Santa Cruz. Has that been signed yet, Denise?
No, it's to be signed by October 10th, and every day I look at Twitter, I'm praying, we need it signed now. We're at a very contentious spot in our lawsuit.
Okay, so if anybody's interested in that issue...
Anybody has Gavin Newsom on his cell phone? Put it forward!
I'm sure most people here have that. Yeah. It's an issue of saying that CEQA doesn't apply to harm reduction programs, essentially, right? Because there are people, including former mayors and police chiefs here, who are trying to stop the harm reduction program here on the basis of environmental rules, which is, when you're looking at the facts, is complete nonsense. So if you're interested in doing that, talk to Denise Elerick right there. Finally, we financially supported several organizations and events, including the MLK Convocation and the Queer Youth Leadership Awards. We're fortunate enough to have a small amount of money, but we have some money that we can give to people. Any questions at this point? There'll be time for questions and answers later on, but curious, anybody has any questions at this point? No? Okay. So we are now got Stacey Falls is now going to do a brief remembrance. We started this it was last year, 2020, a long time ago, and we thought it was important to remember people that we've lost.
Hello. It's really good to be here. I haven't been to like an event like this in a year and a half, I think. So I'm stoked to be here, be outside on this nice day, see all of you. I think this last year and a half has really reminded us of sort of how connected we are and how important community is. All of a sudden, when we can't see each other because we're sheltering in place, we start to really miss folks. And so I was thinking about like people that we've lost, and obviously nationally we've lost just giants in the crusade for civil rights. John Lewis, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. There were a few folks who whose names I'd never heard, but when I read their story, I was like, these are amazing people. Bernard S. Cohen, who was the lawyer that won a landmark case that led the U.S. Supreme Court's rejection of laws forbidding interracial marriages. April Dunn, a longtime advocate for people with disabilities, making sure that high school students with IEPs had an alternative path to getting a diploma. We lost Reverend Robert Grates and his wife Jean Grates, who were white supporters of the Montgomery bus boycott. And I think we felt those losses all around the nation, but locally, the person that I want to honor is Dennis Etler, who we lost recently. And I first met Dennis. I was actually working with folks to help create the warming center, which opens on the coldest and rainiest nights so that people who sleep outside don't die of hypothermia. And we were having some of our organizing meetings, and Dennis was there cooking this amazing Chinese food. And that's the thing I remember about him, actually, was that he just always kept all of us activists and organizers really well fed. And he actually spent a lot of time in China, which is why like cooking Chinese food was kind of his passion. He, in the early 1980s, he was in a master's program in anthropology, and I guess became sort of an expert in Chinese anthropology. He would go there regularly to do anthropological digs. He was published for his work, but like the thing I really remember was that he kept us all really well fed. He totally, yeah.
And today's his birthday.
So he's, after receiving his PhD, he settled here in Santa Cruz. He taught at Caballero College and Gavilan Community College. And so I think a lot of people know him from his work with the UN Association, but he kind of showed up at everything. I mean, we'd always see him at every rally, at the town clock. I mean, he was always there. And actually, when he passed, he was working on organizing an event that the ACLU co-sponsored, the Hiroshima Day of Remembrance. And I think like his loss is something we all feel, and I wanted to just take a moment to recognize him and acknowledge his passing and the hole he's leaving in our community. So thank you for taking me a moment to do this.
Project Colony.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, he inspired a lot of local activists and local organizers. I mean, he was kind of everywhere, inspiring everyone, and I think we're all gonna really miss him. So thanks for the opportunity.
Before we begin our award ceremonies, I just am constrained to tell you that our parent organization, the ACLU of Northern California, requests that everybody wear masks unless they are eating or drinking. So I just felt obligated to tell you that.
So now you've been told. Everybody can hear me well? Good. Welcome. As Stacey said, it's really wonderful to see everybody in the flesh again. The personal communication and contact that we have with one another, I think, is one of the most important things that we share as a human community. I am Steve Pleich. I'm a member of the board of the Northern California ACLU of Santa Cruz County. And it's my honor to make the first introduction for our awardee today. When I was gathering my thoughts about some introductory remarks, I was reminded what a challenge it is sometimes to be an activist. There are days when we're not sure we're in the right place, we're doing the right thing, we're making the right effort, and we wonder, are we really making a difference in our community? Our first awardee does all those things in abundance and consistently. She is in the right place, she is doing the right thing, and she is making a difference in this community. Isabella Bonner, who I've had the pleasure of working with collaboratively with SCORE, the Santa Cruz County Community Coalition to Overcome Racism. We worked together this year with not only Isabella, but her friends from Blended Bridge. I was inspired by her passion and her commitment to making Santa Cruz a more racially just, equitable place, but also making it a more diverse place. I think oftentimes we forget that we need diversity, that we need a racial consciousness, that we need people to remind us to always act in the ways that we can see and reflect and understand are in our best interest as a human community. And this is something that Isabella does, again, with articulation, with energy, with flair. She is not only the co-founder of Blended Bridge, and she is the co-founder of Black Surf Santa Cruz. I would like just to read something from their website, and please do look at blendedbridge.com to see all the wonderful work that they're doing. But I'd like to read you briefly their mission statement to give you an idea of what kind of work Isabella and her friends and comrades are doing. Their mission is to empower and inspire collective community. Blended Bridge aims to connect the community of individuals who oftentimes feel like their identities have gotten lost in the middle. More importantly, our goal is to create a safe, inclusive community that welcomes every individual for who they are and what they identify as, whatever that might be. This is the great work that Blended Bridge and Isabella Bonner have taken on. This is one of the many reasons why I'm very pleased and proud to present this year's Bella Freedom Award to Isabella Bonner. Please help me welcome her.
Thank you, Steve, for that introduction, and to the entire Santa Cruz chapter for making this possible. I am extremely humbled to be the recipient of the Bella Freedom Award and to be recognized for some of my work of dreaming and creating a more equitable Santa Cruz. I again just want to express my gratitude to the ACLU and its members who are always willing to speak up and act when they see injustice within our community. And especially when we as a society are falling short of our founding civic values. So I really, really am just so grateful. Just thinking both historically and presently to the work that the ACLU has done and has been engaged in just our fight for our basic liberties, including justice, human rights, civil rights, and ultimately fostering a mission of just creating a society free of oppressive restrictions really just makes this award mean that much more to me. So I'm truly grateful. And my personal goal and vision for Santa Cruz is to help inspire and empower a collective community culture of acceptance, belonging, tolerance, and an equitable quality of life for all of our residents. But most importantly for me is to put our Black and people of color residents at the center of that sentiment. I personally aspire to take a proactive approach in my work toward the issues that are currently holding us back from achieving that quality of life for all of our residents. And I really want to express my gratitude to my family, my sister, my mom, and my late father for always challenging me to speak my mind when we are falling short. And also to just the entire community that's been open to showing up, growing, learning, and healing together to help bring that dream and vision to life. So, round of applause to you all. I believe that all of us have a role in ensuring that we're meeting the social determinants of health and our basic human liberties so that we're all able to thrive and succeed here in Santa Cruz County. And it's truly going to take all of us to create that type of culture and community that we want to see and be a part of. And I think that ACLU founder Roger Baldwin said it best, so long as we have enough people in this country willing to fight for their rights, will we be called a democracy. And so I'm just extremely humbled and excited to continue engaging in this work, continuing to be in community with you all, addressing the culture and areas of opportunity and improvement that I see personally, creating spaces for physical, mental, and spiritual wellness for our BIPOC community members, and ultimately being able to bring all types of people together to just exist and be in one space. And I really look forward to continuing to be a part of this community, dreaming big and envisioning a society that we're all able to thrive and prosper in. So just thank you again so much to all of you, and for this incredible honor and award. It's like truly an honor and privilege to be in community with you all. So thank you.
Wow, I'm amazed. Thank you, Della. So I'm Denise Elerick, a new board member, and I'm here to present the Hammer of Justice Award with the emphasis on hammer to Elizabeth Caballero and Johnathan Gettlemen. I met them for lunch a few weeks ago after we had nominated them, and my mind was continually just blown away. Partly because of the work that I do and the complaints that I hear, with no ability to have any restitution or even be heard because of fear of retaliation. And Johnathan, you can look at their website. I won't read things verbatim, but Johnathan and Elizabeth came in 2015. They formed a law practice doing a lot of successful criminal defense. But more recently, they have shifted the focus of their practice entirely to police abuses and jail conditions nearly exclusively. And I want to be mindful of, if you pray or meditate, I want to be mindful of what I'm about to say, and I also want to acknowledge the children here, so this might be hard to hear for children's ears. But the work that Johnathan and Elizabeth are doing barely makes the media. You won't see it on a transparency portal on the police websites or the sheriff's website. These are voices of people that are ignored and victims of police abuse and deaths in the jails, and their families are suffering greatly because no one knows the pain that they experience. And I just deeply appreciate Elizabeth and Johnathan for elevating their voices. It's just cruel and wrong. And when we have a jail that basically is a torture chamber in our community, and we don't know and we ignore it. Some of their recent cases, there have been 2 wrongful death cases in the Santa Cruz County Jail that you may have seen in the media, thank goodness. And they highlight several systemic problems in the county jail. One is German Carrillo, who was 23 when he was brutally murdered by his cellmates and not located in his own bed for 36 hours. That was 36 safety checks required by law while German was dead that did not turn up his body in his own cell. He was 23 and he had been waiting 6 years for trial. This case highlights how much leeway gangs are given to run their unit with impunity. It also highlights the long-standing problems of errant classification, non-functioning emergency buttons, falsified safety check logs, understaffing, and overcrowding. You may have read in the media that German was a gang member, and sometimes that is thrown out to kind of get us off the trail, but there's no evidence that German was in a gang, and that has been very painful, I think, for the community who's lost their son, and for the family, and I deeply regret, I'm very sorry for their loss. And if you pray, if you light a candle, will you please keep them in your thoughts? The other wrongful death case was a young man known by some of us here. His name is Tamario Smith. And Tamario suffered from schizophrenia, and he was 21 years old, and he died on Mother's Day of 2020. And he was being held in 20 hours of solitary confinement, alone and actively hallucinating. He also did not have a functioning emergency button in his cell. He died of psychogenic polydipsia, which is the overconsumption of water, which is a condition commonly associated with schizophrenia. This case highlights the lack of medical and psychiatric care in the jail. the use of solitary confinement as a routine housing classification for mental illness, the lack of emergency buttons in the cell, and the lack of adequate safety checks. The other cases that they are working on involve some of our most vulnerable community members who seriously have no recourse and have no voice out of fear of law enforcement, and that is our community of neighbors that do not have a house and they live unsheltered. And we have also experienced terrible sexual assault problems in the jails, both with staff and inmates on inmate and staff on inmate. One sexual assault case involves an inmate thrown into a cell, and other inmates locked in for several days without anyone checking on them, without any due process. To be respectful of the children, you can imagine what happened. No one heard the screams, nobody checked on this person, and it was very dangerous. And he had no working emergency buttons. The guards never came into his cell to check on him, and the unit was so overcrowded, people were sleeping in plastic boats all over the day room of the unit, including under the steps. His assailants were not prosecuted, and the jail conducted barely any investigation required by PREA. The other sexual assault cases involves staff and correctional officers, which really isn't very shocking. As Johnathan and Elizabeth kind of explained to me, this is really common in jails and prisons. They become very sexualized, and it's truly a blight on our community, what's happening in our jails. There have been incidences of police use of excessive force with our most vulnerable community members who suffer from behavioral health and mental health illnesses and that are homeless. They just settled an excessive force case with the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office for wrongful arrest and excessive force. The federal judge found on summary judgment that the deputies illegally arrested our client without probable cause for elder abuse. In the course of that false arrest, that deputy unjustifiably shot the client in the back with a taser, causing him to stiffen like a board and fall backwards, landing right on the back of his head in a parking lot. He was homeless for 15 years prior to that. He should never have to be homeless again after the substantial settlement. Another case settled this year with the Santa Cruz Police Department for brutally beating an epileptic person they misperceived as resisting arrest. He was punched in the face repeatedly while having a seizure for a minor misdemeanor. SCPD agreed to mandatory department-wide training on identifying epilepsy. There was also a similar case in Scotts Valley with Kaiser. The client was at the Kaiser in Scotts Valley to establish care, the primary care physician, and so that he could get neurological testing. Within 10 minutes, his new primary care person asked him some questions. He called the police department and asked for a 5150 hold. Scotts Valley Police Department showed up and detained him without clearly identifying themselves. They proceeded to grab him intentionally and harm him greatly. They then arrested him for obstructing their unlawful investigation of his alleged mental condition. These are just the things that we know about. And as somebody who works in the community of people that have no housing, who have had their cars towed, I don't even know where to go. I mean, I'm just so excited to see the people here that I have some cards and some resources. Like, I don't even know where to go with these complaints because my complaint could put them at great danger. And their own complaints could elevate their harm. So that's a frightening thing that that Santa Cruz County is facing. So I am truly honored to support the work of Johnathan and Elizabeth. I'm so appreciative for their advocacy for the invisible people in our community who have no voice. And I look forward to partnering with them on sheriff's oversight. Nobody should have a budget that size with no oversight other than the bro network that I call our board of supervisors. It is not right, and we can do better. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of organizing, and the ACLU would love to partner with you. So welcome, and please come up and introduce yourselves. So thrilled to know you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you everybody for being here, for joining us on this beautiful afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Caballero. I'm honored to be here with my co-recipient, my partner, love of my life, father of my children, serve partner, friend, Johnathan Gettlemen. To be recognized by the organization that has often single-handedly fought to preserve individual rights guaranteed by our Constitution is a privilege beyond measure. For over 100 years, the ACLU has not just been one organization, but the organization that has stood up to government overreach and fought against harmful and abusive practices, all in the unique effort to secure the individual liberties that have been promised to us. And they have often done it alone and done it entirely based on donations. In that same vein, Johnathan and I have strived to secure equal access to justice by representing each individual client to the best of our abilities. We have fought to preserve our constitutional rights through our criminal practice, and in our current fight against police abuse and the mistreatment of incarcerated persons, we have sought what has so often eluded our society: accountability of the very persons who hold the public trust. Growing up in El Paso, where I had the unique privilege of growing up in a truly binational community where half of the students in my schools commuted every day from Mexico, it's also where I fell in love with skateboarding. And it is through skateboarding that I discovered this beautiful community, Santa Cruz. I was introduced to the renegade and often subversive culture that Santa Cruz demonstrated to the world as I flipped through blisteringly hot days in El Paso and looked through Thrasher magazine and saw bootlegged videos of skateboarders going on Ocean Street along the levee. As a child, all I knew was that I wanted to be part of this Santa Cruz world where the lines of distinction between artist, athlete, and activist were all blurred and people broke the boundaries of what is possible. Being able to be part of this community, to practice law, to raise our family, is a true gift. A precious gift. But we could not have done it without your love and support of our friends and our families. We have been blessed with an incredible support network who has helped us weather very significant storms, held us, nourished us in our darkest hour, buoyed our spirits when we felt overwhelmed. Each one of you has expanded my notion of the human condition, and I've been inspired by each of you individually and collectively. Special thanks goes to Eleanor Childs, Johnathan's mom, a mother of 7, a grandmother to 18, a lawyer who in the middle of her career developed an educational curriculum to teach ethics to children. Thank you, Eleanor. To Paul, Johnathan's dad, one of the original wave of renegade lawyers who has spent his entire life fighting for the accused. I had the honor to do my very first trial with Paul. I should have stopped there. We got a directed verdict. Client was able to walk, and it should have just been, well, that should be it. Keep going. To Eleanor's husband, Bob, Johnathan's stepfather, a professional scientist who has taught me to always look for the rational solution, to be prepared, even when you think you don't have to be, and has always been so very interested and supportive of our pursuits. Thank you, Bob. To my sister-in-law, Kristen, my brother-in-law, Park, Johnathan's sister and his brother-in-law, their 3 children, Kai, Lola, and June. Kai could not be here. He's done that terrible thing that children do, grow up and go off to college. Your impassioned advocacy to prevent the harmful impact of climate change on ours and future generations has been so inspirational to us, so given us the energy to do the things that we do and for who we do them for. Benjamin, Johnathan's brother, for his professional dedication to the art of mediation and the hard work that it takes to bring disparate parties, that means people who are not getting along at all, to a meeting of the minds. We love you, Benjamin. Thank you for being here. To his sister Deborah, for her commitment to the fight for equal treatment of persons with disabilities, and her husband, who spends long hours also doing very hard work bringing the software to companies that are building 3D housing in most impoverished places in Mexico, and will transform what it means to have a community for people who cannot afford housing. Incredible work. To Holly and Jeff, our pod crew, Jeff Rawlings here too, attorney extraordinaire. We could not have gone through pandemic without you guys. You helped our kids, you helped educate our kids. Thank you guys, we love you. To our friend Mandy, advocate, attorney extraordinaire, amazing person. I follow you, I look at you, I see what you're doing, what Mandy's doing, that's where you want to go. To my sister Deborah, who curates all good art and literature for me, who has been my champion even when I could not be my own. As an immigration attorney, she has helped countless numbers of people pursue their dreams and our shared sanctuary to unite with loved ones, enjoy professional opportunities, and to live a life of their choosing. Her love of languages, experiences, the known and unknown has offered me a far more enriching life than I could have ever lived on my own. To my own mom and dad, who I'm deeply grateful for loving me, for fostering me, in me a love of learning. They taught me that a life of service is a life of the highest order. Without their belief in me and their wholehearted investment in me and my education, I would be nothing. To our two daughters, Simone and Nadine. Every day you inspire me to be my best self. You have endured significant challenges this year, like all of us, and in the face of them, you have risen to the occasion, matured, adapted, persevered to become outstanding kids, athletes, students, artists, activists, and all-around wonderful human beings. We love you, infinity times Googleplex times eternity. But last but not least, to Johnathan, my rock, my partner, my love. I could not imagine a more devoted husband, father, friend, law partner. Practicing life and law with you is the best thing that ever happened to me. From this partnership, all good things have flowed. Our children, our extended families, our friendships, and our professional pursuits. You may not know this, but Johnathan is an expert on the idea of NIN. That is, you fall 7 times, you get up 8. I've always felt you have my back, which is no small thing in this perilous world. But your sincere pursuit of all things fair, even in the face of impossible odds, one of them being a lifetime dedication to the freedom of Muhammad. You continue to amaze me. Your unique perspective on life, love, and law has allowed me to grow as a person, all with your loving support. To say the least, I cannot thank you all enough for the guidance, support, love, and friendship you have all given me. It is in this joint enterprise, this life, that we must travel and help each other up when we see another fellow traveler on this path who has fallen. We try in our unique way to do just that. Thank you to the ACLU of Santa Cruz, for helping us individually and collectively get up, dust ourselves off, and pursue a life of our making. Thank you.
As of yesterday, I've been married to this beautiful woman to my left, your right, for 17 years. Together for 20. Just getting started. What we do is hard. The people that support us, for them it's hard. We take on big governments, and it's only the two of us. I mean, it's all of you supporting us, but sometimes it feels like when we're under attack, which we often are, it's the two of us in our little bunker we call our office, and we are envisioning what we may manifest. So I won't repeat what Elizabeth said. Nobody could say it better. I will fill in some blanks. Elizabeth comes from a family of lawyers. She has 3 sisters that are lawyers. Her dad was a lawyer. He argued 2 cases in front of the United States Supreme Court. You might have heard of one of them, Brown versus Texas. It established the standard of reasonable suspicion to be stopped by a police officer. He won that one. Thank goodness. Elizabeth's mom was probably, Elizabeth's the best lawyer I know, and she's so modest you'd never hear a whiff of it. But her mom was an excellent attorney, probably the best in the family, but she never quite got to law school. You wouldn't know it in a conversation around the dinner table, especially if you were the one under the heat, which I was fairly often. But, we truly had a village, and we really appreciate that. We really appreciate the attorney community of Santa Cruz. We've kind of gone off in a slightly different direction from our criminal defense friends, some of them, and civil attorney friends, some of them, and kind of charted a unique path. And the universe thus far has supported it. So we are very appreciative. I'm going to hold it together here. Never been given an award before. All right. So one of the most special people in my life is my godfather. His name is Fredrick Burton. He became a Muslim in prison, and he now goes by Muhammad. We have been working on his case since I was born, and my parents held me up and said, "This is going to be your lawyer." So I am. We're very close to getting him out of prison. He's been in prison since 1970. He was convicted of a very political murder of a Philadelphia police officer, a very well-known case. And my father was his lawyer. Not for his criminal trial, but they met when my father was working in prisons. And my father brought a case, class action, to defeat the principle that somebody could be held in indefinite solitary confinement without any process and no way out, and no behavior, no violent behavior that put him in. And he won that case. Yes, so my godfather, who I love, has spent 16 years in total solitary confinement, 50 years in prison. And it's just unbelievable how such a beautiful human is stripped of all powers of manifestation for his whole life, for challenging our various and varying systems of bondage and domination. And I carry his purpose in all of our efforts at our positive manifestation. So if you'll humor me for a minute, I did write some words and about the jail, and I'd like you to hear them. I usually don't stand up and read in front of people, but I spent some time on this, and so I'd appreciate your attention. County jails are the responsibility of the entire community in which they exist to make sure they serve their intended purpose, which is to secure people to be processed through the court into some level of control and diminishment of their rights by the government. Or not, if they win their case. And we all pay dearly for them, both in moral weight of such levels of domination over fellow human beings and in our resources. The sheriff runs the jail and the security of the courts, amongst other things. The sheriff controls 25% of the entire county budget, your local tax dollars, 25%. $100 million a year is a lot of money for a county our size. Do you know how much money is allocated for education in comparison? 1%. This system is supported by all our taxes, our votes, exercised and withheld, our bodies, our life energy, whether we are aware of it or not. We are not naive. As criminal attorneys for decades, we know well that some people need to be separated from society for their acts. But the regular overextension of this principle is one of the illusory justifications for systems that apply incarceration much more broadly than what is necessary. We need to acknowledge that the origin of jails are inexorably related to human bondage and exploitation. This is particularly true when you factor in race and economics. Statistical data demonstrates that you can predict quite accurately who will one day become a prisoner before they are even born. It was no less true here historically with missions and farm worker exploitation as it was in the South with African slavery. Everyone made illegal is ripe for reaping, and the prison industrial system requires our bodies. It's enshrined in the very language of the 13th Amendment. Slavery and involuntary servitude became illegal after the Civil War, quote, except as punishment for a crime duly convicted, end quote. That except means that slavery still exists by statute, by our very governing Constitution, as long as they secure that conviction first, or you're waiting for that conviction to be secured. While not to the same degree, we still use similar vagrancy laws as were used in the South to put people into our jail, to separate people from their families, and to remove undesirables from our streets. So who in our community gets to determine who gets the cage and how the cage is kept? Who gets to oversee the institution caging our people that become the prisoners? Some just based on a bad day, an involuntary addiction, a mental illness, or just general destitution. Who is responsible when no one is taking care of our captured? Historically, the payoff for the jailing class was that they would have no consequence for their misdeeds, because the very act of caging people is arguably an inherent misdeed we ask them to perform. Until last Thursday, when SB 2 passed and was signed by Governor Newsom, if someone was injured or killed in jail, they could not sue the jail under any circumstances in a California court for the injury. The county, the jail, all its staff were immune pursuant to Government Code 821.6. It did not matter what the conditions or contributions that led to the injury or death. And it's not just the jailers. District attorneys who prosecute people knowing they are innocent or less culpable than the accusation are immune. The board of judges who sentence people or grossly err, or over-sentence people, or grossly err as to the law are immune. The Board of Supervisors who create and approve administrative policy and fund the jail are immune for their decisions. In our county, who is in control of the system from start to finish? In this county, it is all controlled by 8 white men. The sheriff, the DA, the 5 county supervisors, and the presiding judge. None of them are required to spend any time in the cages they control before they put people in them. It has literally never been substantially different in this county, to my awareness, since the implementation of this system. And those men are all well off and entrusted with the spending of our resources. Just this week, they paid $5.5 million of our money to settle one jail case. There have been and are so many payouts for violation of constitutional rights of our caged wards, and the slimmest amount of them even come to public attention. Many of us benefit from jail through making our living off this system. All the lawyers, the judges, the probation officers, the law enforcement officers of various uniforms, the experts, the corrections officers, and on and on. This is a large portion of our county's professional class that's living is derived from our captives. And despite all the resources we as a community pour into this system and extract from it, we as community members are not allowed to know what happens inside to any degree of individual specificity. It's all a black box, which favorable myths and illusions are spun in the absence of specific data and specific occurrences. And because of the immunities, the truth rarely ever comes to court or broad public awareness. History has demonstrated that immunizing law enforcement, and particularly jailers, creates a breeding ground for abuse and neglect. Non-accountability makes law enforcement arbitrary, base, and terrifying for those subject to its domination. Immunity defies the Nuremberg principles. Everyone must be responsible for their individual actions. Thank you. People in jail are stripped of every manner of self-care and security as they are completely controlled and housed in small cages. We owe them a meaningful duty of care that is enforceable. If this institution is to exist in our community, it must be overseen by a collective of our citizens who do not have a direct professional interest in it. We must learn what is happening inside through subpoena power, and we must be empowered to demand corrective changes. Deplorable things are happening in our jail, and if you are interested in learning about them, I would direct you to the grand jury's annual reportings on it, particularly this year. None of the emergency buttons in the cells work. There is no way to call for help. The safety check system is deeply flawed and largely fraudulent. And 20 to 23 hour a day solitary confinement has become a routine, non-punitive housing classification. Any solitary confinement is defined as torture by most international standards. Any. And we do it here in this county as a solution to understaffing. Prior to COVID, our jail was grossly overcrowded since its opening. Inmates were forced to sleep in plastic boats all over the floor and under the steps. You couldn't even walk. It was so crowded. In what used to be the day rooms, which was what everybody that was not in their cell, they'd hang out in the middle part. There is no middle part. They're triple bunked and boated. With the close of Blaine Street and the Roundtree, the boats will return. Young people like Tamario Smith and Edmond Carrillo, who were literally dripping with beauty and potential, are literally dying in varying forms of gross neglect without ever meeting a jury of their peers. Who is accountable? The jail is in constant rolling crisis, and the Board of Supervisors refuses to hold a single public hearing on the issue of Citizens Oversight Commission or jail conditions, despite formal pleas in writing from the grand jury. The sheriff and the Board of Supervisors routinely refuse to implement the grand jury's recommendations. Widespread ignorance of our jail's condition is apparently the best. Widespread ignorance of our jail's condition is apparently in the best political interest of every elected official directly responsible. And that would be the 8 well-off white men I mentioned earlier. As I mentioned, many of the people in jail have not been to trial yet and are presumed innocent. If this is how we treat the innocent, imagine how bad it is for the duly convicted that go to state prison. If our Constitution is to mean anything, at least our family members subject to being dragged into these cages should have the right to defend themselves in court. In order for that to happen, the caged have to be able to appear in court alive and well enough kept to meaningfully participate in the process. That is not happening now for far too many people held captive in our jail. All of this is why we need to demand the right to know what is happening in our names, in our jail, and exercise those rights diligently. Elizabeth and I have committed to taking this conversation to federal court, which is far from perfect. Thank you. But they do possess superior jurisdiction and power should it choose to wield it, in the absence of local political and administrative will. You cannot get a local court to give you 2 seconds on any of these issues that I'm talking to you about. There is no path that I'm aware of. Luckily, we are practicing in one of the most progressive federal courts in the country. People of goodwill are looking around, especially during COVID, and asking, is this system the best use of our resources? Is this the way we want to realign the wayward among us? And federal judges are by and large recognizing the need for law enforcement and municipal accountability and participating in these deeper discussions. We want to be there with them when the conversation is happening. We are deeply appreciative of our clients and their families and their suffering, our families and our community for supporting us in these deeply challenging processes. New paths are being created. Together, we can change these exploitive systems into more supportive and restorative ones. I know that this talk of mine has been heavy and troubling, and I appreciate you listening. But just as a beautiful pearl is built around an imperfect irritant, so is the pursuit of justice for those of us who are forced to live in cages. Their conditions must torment us such that we will be compelled to action. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon again. Great company, great food, great information and activism, being together again, and great honorees. Hope you're all having a great time. Give yourselves a round of applause. I'm Ron, I'm on the board. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today in this uplifting, not always uplifting, but informational and activist celebration today. I'm honored today to introduce Simba Kenyatta. With the Paul Johnson Lifelong Community Activist Award. And Simba has been fighting racism his entire adult life. Starting out as a member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, he's currently on the board of directors of Habitat for Humanity, past board and current advocacy committee. Actually, he's still on the board of the Community Action Board. He's on the board of the NAACP and a recent past president, co-founder and chair of Santa Cruz County Community Coalition to Overcome Racism, a member of the committee for the Martin Luther King Convocation in affiliation with UCSC, the Santa Cruz Juneteenth Committee, a candidate 3 times for the Santa Cruz City Council, past board member and president of the local ACLU. Simba, please come up and let everybody know anything and all that you'd love to tell people. Thank you all again.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm glad to see you people out here. It's really nice. The first thing I want to say and the last thing I'll say is that there's no such thing as something, I'll just put it another way. I believe that stars and trees and you and dolphins are all the same thing. We just look different. But there is only one thing in the whole universe, and that's us. One thing in the whole universe. So we got to remember that these people just look different than you. They aren't much different, but they look different. I believe in worldwide revolution in any and all forms. No, I am not a nonviolent person, and I have to take my teeth out, because I can't talk. Which all brings me to something else. When we see people on the streets and we assume that they're meth heads or something because their mouth is raggedy, that's about poverty. I had my first feeling in my teeth about 10, 15 years ago. Every time they just yank it. They didn't fill it with anything, they just yank them. So when you see people around here with raggedy mouths, a lot of it has to do with poverty and not drugs. I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is a good place to be from. It was. I went to an all-black school till I was in the 5th grade. Then I went to a school that was for all kinds of people. It was special ed. So I went to school with people that had cerebral palsy, blind, different kinds of handicaps. So I learned then that there's no difference in us, that we're all the same thing. I had a friend there that I used to laugh at a lot, and people couldn't understand it. They couldn't understand him because he had cerebral palsy. So he couldn't talk very well. But I grew up with a guy that had cerebral palsy, so I knew everything he said. And he used to tell some of the most rank jokes that I've ever heard in my life. But, so anyway. I went to a grade school that I was the only black person there and the only black person that had ever been there. So I went there because of special ed, because I'm smart. I'm really smart. I used to kind of like hide it, but then I checked out that Stephen Hawkins' IQ was 164, Einstein was 162,
My IQ was 169. I'm really smart. And doing this, I may laugh like you see, and sometimes I may cry because I'm like on that edge all the time. I cry at commercials. And I'm serious. I cry at a lot of things that people think, whoa, dude, you're a 68-year-old black man. We do crying about a commercial. But that's who I am. When I graduated from grade school, went to high school, I started what I call a Human Relations Council. Because in 1967 and 68, there was a lot of racial animus going on between people. And I thought that had to stop. So I got people together, we sit down and talked. It worked so well that I got to go to different high schools and teach them how to do it, and I got credit for it. Because teaching people how to treat each other is a long, long process, but necessary. I joined the Black Panther Party in 1968, Black Panther Party for self-defense. I always try to get people to understand that it's for self-defense. I was also a black nationalist, meaning that I thought the black people should live by themselves without white people. I'm actually kind of still on the bridge about that, because black people or people of color just, the way we talk to each other, the way we deal with each other has to change. I was a black national, like I said, because I didn't think that black people and white people could live together. Like I said, and I'm still hard pressed to try to justify, to try to make it good that we live together. And it's not easy at all. So, when I walked in my house with my Black Panther uniform on, my father grabbed that uniform and tore the patches off of it and said, "You're not going to bring that shit in this house." It wasn't because it was something I was doing wrong. He just knew that the police may come in your door at any time and do anything to you. I don't know if you know about Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in Chicago. These two men, they were in bed, and the FBI, Cook County Sheriff, came up and shot 300 times inside their apartment. They said, well, that's because they shot first. What they found was that shot wasn't a shot, it was a bullet hole from a ricochet. So they never picked up a gun against these police, but they're dead now. So my father was really upset about me being a Black Panther because he knew they may kill you. As a matter of fact, I just found out when I was in my 40s that my mother bought me a life insurance policy when I was 18. She said, because I wanted to just be able to bury you, because they might kill you. When I lived in Jamaica for a couple of years, it became a little more real. I got picked up at 2 o'clock in the morning by the CIA at gunpoint. Actually, it was a really pretty gun. It was chrome-plated, pearl handled, and that's all I could see at that point, actually, was just the gun. I didn't see anything else. So they took me away and told me, quote, "Get your black ass off this island. We do not want you here." Because when you talk about revolution in other places, it's a real thing. You talk about revolution here, nobody has a clue. Which is one of the things that this problem is European Americans, white folks, have to learn about sustained struggle. And it bothers me because it isn't something that isn't part of your life. When I was in the Black Nationalists, I used to talk about when the Vietnam War was ending, Vietnam War was over, and I kept saying, all right, we have this revolution going on. They finally understand race and finances and stuff. And I had that faith that we can do this. I was literally laughed at by black people saying, white people aren't into you. As soon as this war is over, they're going to stop. As soon as the war was over, all the stuff stopped. All the hippies turned into yuppies, and there was nowhere for us to go. There was nowhere for people of color to go. There was nowhere for people that had a revolutionary thought to go. When I was younger, I thought, okay, I'm tired of police. We got to do something. So I figured out a way we could do it without police. If we got 2 people on each block to be trained in first aid, CPR, and those things, we don't need the police to come to our neighborhoods. You understand? So when I was young, I just kept seeing it in my head that these people, every block had at least 2 people that were trained. You know who in your neighborhood is selling dope. You know who in your neighborhood is beating up his wife. You know who these people are. So it makes more sense for us to take care of each other that way than to rely on the police to take care of us. We have to take care of each other. Like I said, there is no such thing as other. There's only one thing in the whole entire universe, and that's us. That is I. I also have several problems. I have several mental illnesses. One from being abused when I was a kid. My father used to beat the hell out of me, make me take off my clothes and beat me for a while with a belt and stuff. So I ended up having PTSD. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I also have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have, what else? And I'm bipolar. And I managed to do the things that I do in spite of these mental illnesses. I think maybe even sometimes it may be because of the mental illnesses. Something just jumped in my head because I was listening to them talking about jail and stuff. And one thing I've always advocated for is a police review board, a civilian police review board with no police on it whatsoever. I don't even want them having any input in it whatsoever. This should be totally civilian, totally citizens. I've been working for this for a while, and I'm working on it now. So you want to deal with it, you want to talk to me about it, I'd love to hear you. Part of what I think a lot of us need to do is our mindset. Because we've got the mindset that's been given to us. Like the calling people landlords. That's a feudal term. That's what they did back in what, in the 1400s? They had landlords. And I'm not a Christian, but I know that there's only one lord of the land, and it does not demand rent. So I stopped calling them landlords. I call them rent takers. And I've got a lot of other people starting to call them rent takers, and it changes your mindset. When you're thinking of them as rent takers, not landlords, that puts you on kind of a more equal footing. So it's on us to change our mindsets, because changing our mindsets will change what we do. And what we do is all important. And like I like to tell people, history is about what people do. History is also about what people don't do. Matter of fact, I think history may be even more about what we don't do than what we do. It's on us. I believe in healing. I think once we start letting our walls down, we'll learn how to heal ourselves, each other, and the planet. I honestly believe that if we put our minds to it, we can change things in a way that you would not ever think of. But it's on us to think of past, think beyond what we're being taught. Get out of the mindsets of landlords and stuff and think of them as rent takers. Think of people in jail. Like I said, I cry a lot. There's a law against cruel and unusual punishment. Putting somebody in a cage for 40 years is cruel and unusual punishment. Putting somebody in a cage for a week is cruel and unusual punishment. But that's not the mindset they gave us. The mindset is, oh, they're horrible people. They're supposed to be locked up. But no, because we're not animals. We're not supposed to be in cages. Hell, actually, animals ain't supposed to be in cages. We deal with it. But it's time for us to start thinking differently. It's not just what we think. It's also that what we think leads into what we do. And what we need to do is help each other make this earth look much better. Make our hearts feel much better. have our minds work much better. It's on us. Nobody's going to come and rescue us. Even I tell Christians all the time, even if Jesus came down tomorrow, it doesn't make any difference. You got to do it today. So, there's this kind of joke I have going on in my head about Jesus, about God telling him, well, it's 2,000 years, time for you to go back. And Jesus goes, nope. And God goes, what do you mean, no? He said, do you know what they did to me last time I was there? They nailed me to a freaking cross. I'm not going back there anymore. So, anyway, that's this little thing that runs through my mind sometimes. Well, like I said, before I go, I want to remind you again, we are all the same thing. Looking different, looking at a tree is not different than you. It looks different, but it is not different. We are all the same. One thing I like about Rastafarians, because we use words in ways that it should be. Like when you ask somebody says something to me, and instead of saying her, I say yes, I, because there's only I. So we hear Rastafarians say yes, I, it's about that there is nothing else but I. So I'm going to stop now because they only told me I had 7 minutes, and I've never talked for 7 minutes in my life. But really, I want you to take that away with you. Take away that stars and trees and dolphins and you are all the same thing. We just look different, but there is no difference. So thank you very much. Gave me something. I have a plaque here. Thank you all very much, very much. The interview was wonderful.
Hi everyone, I'm Abbi Samuels with the board, and I'm here to introduce Jan Harwood, who is going to be receiving our Lifetime Achievement, another Lifetime Achievement Award because we had a tie. So Jan Harwood is a reader, a ponderer, an activist, and an amazing songwriter. She started off singing songs for aunties and grannies as a small child. She received a master's degree in philosophy from the University of Missouri in 1954. Jan became politically aware and active at the age of 30 during the fight against nuclear weapons, when she's driven to answer an ad in a magazine that invited her to join SANE, Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy. She didn't just join, she soon started a chapter of SANE in her area. On the crucial sixth day, I don't know, the mic is... It's good. Okay. On the crucial sixth day of the Cuban crisis, which many thought will be the last day on Earth, she joined a large contingent of Quakers outside the White House gates. She went to see the senators and congressmen. Kennedy and Khrushchev worked out their somewhat secret deal that night. And as she hurried home to her family, it dawned on her that she now had become an honest-to-God, committed, capital letter, left-wing activist. Moving to Palo Alto a few months later, she joined the Stanford chapter of SANE, and then got involved in the peninsula's large coalition of anti-nuclear activists. They went to talk at high schools, demonstrated at Lockheed and Rome, and other missile makers, Vandenberg Air Force Base, and the Oakland Navy Yard. She began to learn the joys of getting arrested. She joined the Stanford chapter, I skipped the paragraph. She began to learn the joys of getting arrested with dozens or hundreds of friends and sticking it out with bologna sandwiches and Kool-Aid until the police finally decided that they were too many and too much trouble and let them go. Some arrests required going to court to defend their actions of crossing a forbidden line or passing out literature on private property, but they welcomed those opportunities to state their case to the judge, who is often sympathetic, giving them probation and community service. Throughout her life, she felt ferociously proud of her work with ACLU, which seemed to be there in their pitching whenever democracy and civil rights were threatened. She worked as a psychotherapist for 30 years in the San Jose and Hayward areas, counseling adults in groups, then retiring to Santa Cruz in 1995. She has been a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, WILF, in Santa Cruz for 25 years now, and has served with pride and almost capacity in that noble organization. The League has extended her activism to many areas, such as women's equality, civil rights, union organization, fair trade, the Cuban blockade, water conservation awareness, world poverty, and many other local and international issues. At age 90, Jan still loves to write the lyrics for the Raging Granny's satirical songs. I personally remember Jan first meeting her in 2011 during Occupy in front of the county building waiting to begin her foreclosure march. Jan and the Raging Grannies sang a lot of songs that she wrote. Ever since then, whenever there's a protest, I would call Jan up and ask if she could sing in an event. And every single time she showed up, not only to sing, with little notice, but had songs prepared just for the occasion. I remember Jan and the Raging Grannies sang outside of City Hall right before the City Council meeting in which they were going to vote on having the Bearcat. I remember she came prepared with several songs for SCRAM, Santa Cruz Resistance Against Militarization. She made up songs for Food Not Bombs events. You can always count on Jan and her amazing cohorts for the Raging Grannies. I'm so honored to be able to give this ACLU Lifetime Achievement Award to Jan.
Thank you, everybody. I'm really, really, really honored. And I'm going to read you a very short little speech because Kenyatta is just too great an act to follow. I don't think there is any award I would cherish more than this one, from the one organization that has always been a solid, trustworthy, and may I say unimpeachable upholder of civil rights in this wonky, confusing country that began with the highest and noblest ideals. And to receive it through the bequest of Paul Johnson, for many years my dear friend and fellow activist in the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, is indeed scrumptious icing on the cake. No one ever gave more of himself to working for a better world than Paul did. And he was always reminding us ferociously activist women that we need to have fun too. My very favorite words in all of American history, slightly amended, simply spoken by President Abe Lincoln at Gettysburg, are a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all human beings are created equal. In my 90 years, I've never understood why that simple truth should create such a mare's nest of controversy. And I fervently hope that the ACLU will forever continue to hold the line and continue to push it forward for as far as our minds can see.
Right on, Jan.
And now I have a little surprise for you, which maybe you won't be so surprised about if my friends come up here. And I want to honor these Raging Grannies. For something over 20 years, we've been singing our songs. And they almost never get noticed, their names, and I want to give their names to you. Please hold your hand up when I call your name, will you? Helen Oxley. Paula Leroy. Judy Deere. Happy Israel. Connie Jones. Willow Katz. And there were a couple of other important people that couldn't be here today. Claire Paul and Satya Orion. Oh, Karen Kaplan, she is the newest member, and she's especially valuable because she plays the guitar. Because we've never been known for staying on any given key for very long.
Go there, folks, you know you can trust. There is nowhere so respected and just when you need help in attaining your rights. You can count on them to back you. Go there. If your corpus needs saving, yes, go there. Someone's hurting, it may be us lawyers. For our precious democracy, take your case with no fee. You gotta take it to the ACLU. They've got noble missions, ACLU. They've got no inhibitions. They're in the race, keeps you locked up in jail. There, if your friends can't come up with a bill, just call the ACLU. They've got the best attorneys, ACLU, for migrants and returnees, hard-working champions for freedom of press. Keep us free when the country's a terrible mess. Freedom for our thoughts and our speech. We need freedom to select what we teach. We need freedom for our bodies and minds to uphold our Constitution. ACLU, come on now, join the chorus. ACLU, they work their heads off for us, holding the line when our rights are at threat. America's very best bet, so sing out ACLU. ACLU. Let's hear it! ACLU. Again. ACLU. One more time. ACLU. ACLU. And you can always join the Raging Grannies. We rehearse once a month or something, or sometimes not at all. Always love you to sing with us.
Hello, thank you so much, Raging Grannies. We appreciate your song, and what about the encore? Anyway, it's my great privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Tedde Simon. And Tedde Simon is coming to us from the Northern California ACLU. Okay. And I would like to start with all of us acknowledging that we are on unceded, many of us might say stolen lands, which were stewarded by the Awaswas-speaking Weepy peoples for untold times. And these lands are currently under the care of many indigenous peoples, including the Zayanti, Ohlone, and Amamutsun. Many thanks to these ancestors and to current and future generations of stewards. Tedde is doing her best to bring Northern California indigenous perspectives into planning, policy, education, and culture. She created her position as the Indigenous Justice Advocate for the Racial and Economic Justice Program at the ACLU of Northern California and leads ACLU of Northern California's work centering indigenous voices across multiple issue areas, including education, protection of land and sacred sites, and representation, and strives to build mutual relationships with tribal and indigenous leaders throughout Northern California. Prior to starting the Indigenous Justice Initiative, Tedde was NorCal's first investigator with a focus on fighting the Trump administration's racist and xenophobic anti-immigrant policies. And she has also worked to advocate for houseless members of our society, along with other NorCal staff. And Tedde has a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School and currently resides in Oakland, California on unceded Ohlone lands. Over the past 18 months, she has stayed busy hiking with her dog. I mean, this is besides her job, right? Hiking with her dog, praying for rain, unionizing colleagues at ACLU NorCal with the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, Local 21, and training for a few half marathons. NorCal ACLU is not requiring any staff members to go to in-person events during this COVID period, so we're especially grateful to Tedde for joining us today. She's been working with the Amamutsun to protect their sacred lands of Horastock and on some of their other issues, which is how we got in touch. Please join us in welcoming Tedde. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that introduction. Jat e shikelo shine she Tedde Simon Yenashie. Good afternoon, my relatives. It's so wonderful to be here with you all. I can't believe that I have to follow the Raging Grannies. That was the curtain call. That was so fun, and I'm really excited to send that video, if it's okay, to all the NorCal staff. When I go back to work tomorrow, people will just get a really, really big kick out of that. And at staff conference, if we ever have staff conferences, again, there's always karaoke, and I think that will now be NorCal's go-to karaoke song. That's amazing. And it's also just amazing to be here with you all. Thank you so much for the invitation. It really is beautiful to be in the community, in community with people that I don't yet know, but now I do, and to do this work with you all. So as Dorah said, I'm the Indigenous Justice Advocate at the ACLU of Northern California. I do the work that I do because it matters, because it's my calling. It's also my personal story. I grew up in Washington State, outside of Portland, Oregon. So I didn't have the pleasure of making a mission out of popsicle sticks, but I did have the pleasure of playing a lot of the Oregon Trail on old Apple 2GS computers, which I'm still not sure how that was educational. But certainly on the Oregon Trail, there were no Native people. It was just plucky pioneers in covered wagons, happily headed west, and you hoped that, like, the person that you didn't like in your class got diphtheria and died. But there weren't any Native Americans along the Oregon Trail, and there certainly wasn't any mention of them once you got to what became the state of Oregon. So the issues of invisibility, of erasure, of total lack of representation continue today, as folks had already mentioned. I didn't get to learn my language as a kid. I didn't get to learn any Navajo until I was 30 and went to grad school. So those things are all of our stories and our personal and professional and vocation and calling. So we also have heard so many amazing people talk and share about the work that they're doing here in Santa Cruz. And so I don't want to take up so much more of time and give you all kind of overwhelm you with information. I do want to talk a little about why it's important that we do this work, and then just share a couple of the different cases that ACLU NorCal is working on, including the Protect Your Stock campaign and a campaign to rename a place in Fresno County that's a racial slur, and then happy to hang out and chat with folks and make sure that we don't send our board member back on the bike with all of those beverages I still see on the table. So a little bit of background, and I'm sorry if you're like, yes, we know all of this is old hat, and often it is new and surprising information, so we just always have to start at the beginning, which is California, at least as of the 2010 census, had the largest Native American population in the country, and at the very least among the largest. California also is home to some of the largest urban Indian communities, including Los Angeles, Sacramento, the Bay Area, Oakland, where I live, has a thriving Native community. There are over 100 federally recognized tribes here in California, and anywhere between 50 to 70 or more who are seeking recognition or who are kind of recognized on a list maintained by the state of California, and over 100 reservations or rancherias all the way from the Oregon border to the border with Mexico. Tribes are leading efforts to combat climate change and wildfires. A lot of incredible stuff is happening all throughout the state. Just 2 weeks ago, the city of Albany, which is just north of Oakland, voted to adopt a resolution to recognize the Ohlone people as the ancestral inhabitants of the city of Albany and start to pay a land tax back to the Ohlone people. Just a little over a year ago, the city of Eureka voted to give almost an entire island back to the Wiyot people, which is the center of the Wiyot universe. Just last week, it was announced that the Amamutsan tribal band are getting a cultural easement to a significant place. So there's just really, really incredible stuff that is happening that is led by Indigenous people in this state, which we have to celebrate because we need to celebrate also. And that's not for lack of trying, right? All the amazing things that are happening, that leadership is not for lack of trying. Indigenous people have been rendered nearly invisible. And so we have to put any conversation that we have about our Indigenous justice work into the historical and current context of why we are where we are today. So there's this entire system, the mission system being a part of it, that was really created to solve what people in the federal government came to refer to as the Indian problem, which is the existence of Indigenous people on land that you want that has gold or lumber or is arable, or you simply want to exist on it and you need the Indigenous people not to be there. So there are lots of different systems that you create to get rid of Indigenous people, not just overt massacres, but also by making them completely invisible and by erasing indigeneity. A major tool for doing this was residential boarding schools. So kids were taken from their homes, the hundreds of thousands of children all across the country, violently taken from their homes and sent to residential boarding schools where they were physically beaten and abused for speaking their native languages or engaging in cultural or traditional practices. So that's not only a way to make those children white, but then you completely erase what it means to be a Native American person, and then that land is all yours for the taking. All the talks about the work that you all are doing in the jails here in Santa Cruz is really incredible. The Yurok, which is a tribe in the far north coast, the largest in the state of California, before the arrival of white Europeans, didn't have a word for police. There weren't police. There wasn't a concept of law enforcement in their community. So the word in Yurok for police, translated back into English, is men who steal children. That's who the police were. There wasn't a word in the Hupa language. Hupa is another tribe in the north coast, a little bit inland. There wasn't a word in the Hupa language for jail until boarding schools. And the jail became this basically black hole in the basement where you were sent if you were bad. That became kind of the Hupa word for jail. So even just kind of hearing the work that you're all doing, it's incredible, these connections of what has been brought, but what we can bring forward with us from the past into the future, which is a world in which people didn't have to conceive of law enforcement or jails, and they didn't exist in the language. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit. I don't think it will be a surprise to anyone here that Native American populations hold up some of the worst societal indicators. Rates of police violence, incarceration, abysmal outcomes in our public education system, which is not by accident. Kind of all of these things, but we don't hear many Indigenous voices or Indigenous leaders, at least represented in mass media or in politics. So it's really critical as we think about doing Indigenous justice work that we're putting those Indigenous voices at the center and really lifting up the leadership of Indigenous people. And I will say that when I got to the ACLU of Northern California, we weren't doing this work. We weren't talking about Indigenous justice, and there are still many ACLUs, for all of the amazing work that is happening, that aren't yet doing this work. So this is a path that we are all kind of walking and creating as we go together. So we've been building this work out really intentionally over the last few years, building on really good work that had been done before my arrival. Building relationships with tribes throughout Northern California. And there are kind of two campaigns that I just wanted to share a little bit about with you today. The first is the Protect Your Stock campaign that we got involved in, actually thanks to and at the invitation of the Santa Cruz chapter. There's a lot of information on the table over here, and so I won't talk too much about it because there are also people locally here who can share a lot. But Yurastock is among the last remaining sacred sites of the Amamutsan tribal band, who are the ancestral people of the area, and people who were taken to the Mission San Juan Bautista and Mission Santa Cruz and faced that really horrific treatment there, survived the missions. The Amamutsan tribal band were one of 18 tribes in the state of California to sign treaties with the federal government to recognize tribal sovereignty in exchange for all of the land that is now the United States, a federal trust responsibility to provide for the education, health, and well-being of Indigenous people. Those treaties were taken to the Senate for ratification, and California elite were able to go and lobby the Senate to not ratify those treaties, to put them under seal for 50 years. And so those 18 tribes in the state of California were not federally recognized. And the vast majority of those tribes still are not today. So as a result, the Amamutsan don't have tribal sovereignty recognized by our government. So they don't have a permanent land base. They are not necessarily party to or protected by many federal laws that protect tribes. So it's kind of a cruel joke of history now in this process that peoples who were unrecognized because of the California elite are now, because of California elite wanting to create this open pit mine, might lose one of their last remaining sacred sites. So it's an incredible effort to get to work with environmental organizations, racial justice organizations, the Santa Cruz chapter of the ACLU, lots of other orgs in a campaign that to protect Yurastock. Our role is very much in support of the advocacy with city councils and eventually the Santa Clara Board of Supervisors to deny the permit for the mine. And eventually, I heard someone earlier kind of talking about land back, right? Like it's not just about protecting this sacred site from a mine, it's about giving the land back. So that's the Protect Yurastock campaign. And the second campaign that I wanted to share with you all is about efforts to rename a place in Fresno County that is called currently Squaw Valley. That's the one time that I'll say that word. You may have heard that last week or 2 weeks ago, Tahoe was renamed to Palisades Tahoe. But there are still over 100 places just in California that carry this word that are named for what is a racial slur. To me and basically everyone I know, this isn't a question, and I see a lot of your faces shaking heads, like why do we still have places that are named after racial slurs? In doing some research to start this advocacy that we're doing in Fresno County, we had one of our amazing legal interns go back and look at newspapers and primary sources from the 1850s, 1860s, which is about the time that many white settlers are coming here to California. And this term is used over and over again in ways to depict Indigenous women in just the most dehumanizing and disgusting ways. One is popping to mind that actually referred to Indigenous women using the S word as supplies for the labor or lust of pioneer men. So you paint this image of women in this way. It allows you to not only justify, but really requires you to then take their kids and send them to residential boarding schools. And it just means that you can do anything you want to these non-human people. And the word has an impact today. California has one of the highest rates of missing and murdered Indigenous people in the country, and there's a direct correlation, right, between you can dehumanize someone and think of them as a supply for labor and lust, and then of course there are these incredible rates of violence against Indigenous women. So we're working to support a coalition there in Fresno to get the Fresno County Board of Supervisors to change the name. There's been a lot of resistance, but this is the way that it's always been, or this is our home and, we're proud, or I've never heard a Native person say that word is offensive. So there's a lot of organizing and raising awareness and public education that is happening. It's really cool to get to do the work alongside Indigenous leaders in the Central Valley. It's hard there. The work is hard here in Santa Cruz. The work is hard in the Bay Area. It's a lot harder in places like the Central Valley. And as I was saying before, it's really important to kind of center the Indigenous voices. I just wanted to share a little bit about what Roman Raintree, who's one of the founders of the campaign, has shared with us. He says kind of about this land: humanity itself is born from Mother Earth. For many Indigenous people, their homeland is the center of their universe. Innumerable cultural, spiritual, and tribal connections are forged with the land on which they are born. My cradle board and your cradle board were made with materials gathered in the valley, said my mother. The sour berries you gathered and ate growing up came from that valley. I grew up riding my horse in that valley. This area is not just your ancestral homeland, it's in your DNA. It's who you are. The restoration of our humanity begins with changing the name of our homeland. So Roman is one of the leaders of the efforts to change the name of S Valley. The Board of Supervisors has all but refused to engage with him and with the coalition. So we'll continue to do that advocacy, and we're also looking to take a petition to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to kind of go around a local political process if they won't listen. It is pretty unbelievable how tightly people hold on to what they understand to be their story and their identity when it's so clearly so powerful and so important and so harmful to others. We've been doing a lot of communications work. We've gotten op-eds and articles in the Fresno Bee and the SF Chronicle. There'll be a public service announcement running on the local PBS station in Fresno for Indigenous Peoples Day, just basically asking people the question, did you know that your community is named for a racial slur that dehumanizes Native women? And hopefully, at least for people who weren't aware, that will invite more folks into the movement. We're also doing really exciting education advocacy work, especially in the North Coast and Humboldt County. We released a report last year called Failing Grade that really highlights the educational disparities for Native kids, and we will probably start to work on one that looks at that across the state, because what's happening in Humboldt is happening everywhere, sadly. We will be working in support of the California Truth and Healing Council. Governor Newsom apologized for the state's role in the genocide of Indigenous peoples and created a Truth and Healing Council, which will take testimony from Native people in California and then make policy recommendations. So really, and this is the first ever of its kind in the U.S., so that can be groundbreaking work. And then continuing to build relationships with tribes and Indigenous organizations, and to the extent possible, make sure that those voices are included in our work, whether it be for people who are unhoused, or criminal justice work, or gender, sexuality, and reproductive justice. All of the issues that the ACLU is known for working on impact Indigenous people, and so it's really incumbent on us to make sure that we're building those relationships and including that voice. I could probably say a lot more about the work that is happening and all of the exciting things, but a lot of information has been already thrown at you this afternoon. It's all been really, really inspiring. And so I think I will just close by saying again, thank you for the invitation, and this has been really inspiring for me to come and learn, and also just to say that, you know, almost all of us in the United States are occupying land that was stolen. And just because of that, it is then incumbent upon us to do what we can to advance Indigenous justice. We also have so much to learn. There's such a wealth of cultural, traditional knowledge and different ways of seeing the world, like a world without police, without jails. that we can learn from and accompany. And so I'm so excited that we get to do this work together, and thank you.
Can you take a question?
Yeah.
I have one. So I want you to do it. So this land tax thing you mentioned in Albany, I hadn't heard that, and that's fascinating because it's obviously it's not practical to move 330 million people off the land they live on now, right? But that's an interesting way to make up for it. Is that something that's spread and around, or is it a one-off? Talk about that.
Yeah. So I haven't spoken in a mic in such a long time. So it's a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 called the Soberette Land Trust, which was created by the Confederated Villages of Lishan, which is one of the tribal representations of Ohlone people in the Bay Area. Because they don't have federal recognition, they can't own land in the way that we conceive of it. So they created a 501c3, which can and does now own land. They're getting land back from private landowners in the East Bay and building kind of community gardens where people can come and also then learn Ohlone language and also how to care for and be in right relationship with the earth and what food was like and just kind of all of these amazing things that you do when you can be on and with the land. And also have encouraged everyone who lives in the Bay Area to consider paying what they refer to as shu'umi, which is a land tax, which is to recognize that really none of us necessarily should be on that land and we're all occupying it. And so the minimal that we could do is pay a tax to Soberette. And then they will use those funds to continue doing their work. So to date, the city of Alameda is paying shu'umi, and now the city of Albany will be as well. This is the only Indigenous-led land trust doing this kind of work in the country, but it is very much a growing movement. The Duwamish, another unrecognized tribe in the state of Washington, have similar efforts. And there's one other land trust that's doing a land tax that I'm forgetting, but all across the country, land is actually being given back. It's like every week or 2 weeks now that we see this happening, which is really, really, really exciting. Yeah, and so the Amamutsun Tribal Band, similarly situated, have a land trust. And they're doing incredible work with youth leadership development in a same vein, especially around stewardship of the land. It's really cool.
Any other questions for Tedde?
Appreciation. Thank you.
What? Oh, Dorah.
At the mission bell removal, people were talking about we're getting back bones and other grave remains and saying how it's very difficult to get them back from universities, especially missions. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Repeat the question?
Yeah, so the last mission bell was removed here in Santa Cruz just a couple weeks ago, and folks were talking about, yes, it's really, really exciting, and it's going to be now across the state. And folks were talking about the difficulties in repatriating human remains. And especially from the UC system, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's ancestors in the basement, in the dark, at UC Berkeley, in one of the libraries there. People's ancestors who should be given back to the earth in the way that is appropriate for them are locked away in a basement, kind of as subjects. And I'm not super familiar with the efforts. But there is a lot of advocacy happening at the state level and with the UC system. The UC system is so powerful. We've had to kind of go up against them a little bit around a potential partnership with Dignity Health, which is not the greatest healthcare system. If for a lot of reasons, if you have a uterus or you are not a cisgendered straight person. So it probably will be an uphill battle, but there certainly is a lot of work around repatriating human remains. Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So just a couple
thank you to everybody who spoke. Our award recipients were wonderful, and Tedde said being inspired, and that's really why we do this. We recognize people, but if the award ceremonies are good and the awardees are good, then it's always inspiring to see the work they do and inspire us to work harder too. So thank you all to all the recipients today. I did also want to mention something Tedde referred to, that a lot of the work they're doing in Fresno anyway is being initiated by and centered on Indigenous people themselves, and that's a change that the ACLU of Northern California, at least, has made in recent years. Since I was on the board, the affiliate, for about 10 years, just getting off this year, and it's been a real marked change. The board is much more diverse. When I joined it, it was mostly older white men and women. It's now less than half white people, and along with that is pushing. Instead of saying, okay, we'll help you, what do you need, we'll help you, it's, you guys do it, what do you want to do? You do it, and we'll support you when you do it. The people who are affected by this, who are impacted by what's going on, rather than us knowing or pretending to know what they want and what's best for them. So it's a great change, and I really, again, add my thanks to Doris, to Tedde for coming down here today. So thank you all for coming very much. We'll see you next year. And thank you, Mike Rockton, for the sound system. We could not have done it without you.